So today, we're not going to be in Mark. We're not going to be in Mark. We're pausing Mark as we go through Holy Week. So today we're going to be in John 11 and 12. John 12, of course, is the actual event of the triumphal entry, what we celebrate on Palm Sunday. But we're going to go back and kind of see what leads up to that in John 11. And so I have referenced the raising of Lazarus many times in my preaching. It's one of my just absolute favorites. There's so many parallels, foreshadowings. It's just a lot of layers. It's very rich with meaning, and I love it. It's just great. So I wanted to look at this story and how it leads up to Palm Sunday, and then just kind of what it means for us now. So we're going to go ahead and read. We're going to be in John 11. First, we'll read verses 3 through 6. John 11, 3 through 6 says, "So the sisters sent to him, saying, 'Lord, he whom you love is ill.' But when Jesus heard it, he said, 'This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was." So this is a very interesting set of 4 verses. The sentences that come after the ones you read are not what you expect to happen. Jesus receives this message that Lazarus is ill. It says, "the one whom you love." So this is a very close friend of Jesus. But he doesn't respond with surprise or with worry, right? He responds with knowledge. He receives the word directly from the source. It's news from his actual sisters that his friend is ill, gravely ill, enough to the point where they're telling him this is bad. And he doesn't respond like it's news. He responds as if he knows more about it than they do. He says, this illness, assuming he already knew he had an illness, this illness does not end in death. Which seems very strange, even for us who know the story. We know the end of the story. We know he does die. We do know that the end of the story is that he doesn't stay dead. But it would still have been pretty confusing for those 4 days, right? This illness doesn't end in death. So that's confusing. But then he says that the illness has a purpose, that it's for the glory of God, that the Son of God himself, which is him, will be glorified through this illness. And then we read again of Jesus' love. So the sisters say, "The one whom you love is ill." And then it says that Jesus loved them. He loved these siblings. He loved Lazarus and Mary and Martha. He loved them, so what did he do? He loved them, so he stayed where he was 2 days longer. That's not what you expect to read, right? It's contradicting. You would have thought that, he loved them, so he did what seemed not loving, right? He didn't go to them in their time of need because he loved them. He stayed 2 days longer where he was because he loved them. He let Lazarus die because he loved them. He let them suffer and go through this pain because he loved them. It says he loved them, so he did this. We want to let that be said of us, right? That God glorifies himself in our lives by whatever means he chooses because he loves us. We have to know that it's because he loves us, just like in this story. And we have to hold tightly to that truth. That is a truth that is hard to grasp. Mary and Martha and Lazarus got to figure that out, but they had to go through this time knowing that he loved them and wondering, right? So I want to move on. We'll get to just the main part. This is in verse 39, 11, verse 39. It says, Jesus said, "Take away the stone." So he's gotten there. Too late, right? Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." And I just want to pause for a second, because in my reading and in my research, I came across something, and this is just speculation, but it is interesting, is that in the Talmud, which is the Jewish holy book that they follow today, It talks about Jewish midrash and which is Jewish tradition, something that's been passed down through the Jewish tradition. And it's that they believed that this idea that after the body dies, the spirit or the soul of the body would hang around for about 3 days before it passed on. It's in the Talmud, it's in this book, this holy book, but it was passed down that this was just something they believed. So coming across this is interesting. Details in the Bible aren't there for no reason, right? So the fact that he let him stay for 4 days is interesting. Was he trying to make sure that they couldn't chalk this up to coincidence? Or to the fact that there was a little bit enough life left in the body that it could have come back, but he let it go for 4 days. Again, this is just speculating, but Jesus does everything on purpose. And I want us to see when we're reading the scriptures that we don't pass over things like 4 days. They tell us this for a reason. It's a detail, right, that we should know about. That could be the reason, and it might not be. But don't skip over things just because they seem, like it doesn't matter. Jesus does everything with purpose. We continue reading. Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." So, great scene. This is just the one of the premier, just like great things that happen in the Bible, just this raising of Lazarus. But I want to focus in just on verse 42. He says, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." And he says it audibly. And then he says, "I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around." Well, we know that he talks about, don't go and pray on the corners for everyone to hear. But he says this to the Pharisees because they're doing it in a selfish way, right? He prays audibly to the Father, thanking him because he wants the people around to hear. It's for their benefit to know that this is because of the Father that this happened, that the Father has heard him, that he's connected to the Father. It was for them. And this is his purpose in this passage, but it's the purpose of all of his ministry. It's all for us. He does these things so that we would know that he's sent by God, so that we would believe. So when we're reading in Jesus' ministry and the things he does on the earth, the way he has purpose and the way he has planned all of these things, we see that it's for us. It's to strengthen our faith. He does these things so that we would see him, so that we would see and believe. And then before Jesus goes to his own death, so he's heading off to go to his own death, but before he does that, he goes and he raises Lazarus from the dead. He shows everyone with him, especially his disciples, I have the power over death. He shows them this. And not only that he has the power of resurrection, the power to raise Lazarus, but he also chose to let him die. He chose to let Lazarus die because Lazarus' death was serving a greater purpose. So it wasn't a surprise, but he was foreshadowing. This entire scene is foreshadowing what's going to happen with himself. It's prophecy in the form of action. Because in the same way that he stayed 2 days longer to make sure that he let Lazarus die, he chose for him to die, he also lays down his own life. He chooses to die. He chooses to go to the cross. And he told us this just a chapter before. If you go back to John 10, verses 17 and 18, he says, "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father." He tells them this, and then just a chapter later, he shows them this through Lazarus. He's wanting his disciples to see that this is his purpose, that all the things that are happening are according to plan, even when he goes to the cross. And they don't see it, they're confused, but they will see it, right? So here at the grave of Lazarus, Jesus is encountering death. And death is his enemy. This is the enemy that he's going to fight. But here it's like he fights him. It's like he fights him from afar, kind of. He fights a battle, and he wins the battle. Jesus wins the battle with death here, but it's not the end battle. It's like death gets away to fight again. And so Jesus is eventually going to fight him face to face in the final battle, where death won't get away any longer. Right? This is this battle coming up where he faces his enemy, he fights him, he gets away, he's going to fight him again. And of course, that's Good Friday and that's Easter, so we'll pull it back. We'll stay here with Palm Sunday for now. We're going to move on to chapter 12, verse 9. These pages, okay, they're so thin. All right, verse 9. When the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, they came not only on account of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus. This statement is amazing. This is what we want to be said of us, right? On account of Lazarus, many people are going away and believing in Jesus. They came to see Jesus, but not just to see him. Another crowd has gathered. Another big crowd has gathered. What we know of crowds, we've talked about this, typically the majority of the crowd is coming because of what is trendy, what's popular. They're coming to see the next big thing. But there are a lot of people in this crowd who are becoming disciples of Jesus, who are truly believing. Right? We know, though, that people who get 15 minutes of fame, if they don't capitalize on that very quickly, we move on. I can think of so many little, I was going to name some of them, not. So many little famous things that happen, and we're like, wow, this person is so funny and so great, and then they don't do anything else, and you move on, you completely forget about them. Because you've got to capitalize quickly. That's the fickleness of a crowd. And that's what happens with Jesus. But he continues to do great things. He continues to do greater things. This is why he draws such big crowds. Because we know, with the fickleness of a crowd, that if he just healed a couple people, cast out a couple demons, preached pretty good, people still would have just left. But he continues to do these things. He continues to draw these crowds. And now they're drawn about him because of Lazarus, because of him raising the dead. But this one's slightly different. This one has people truly believing, and it has people that were not even involved going out and telling, which we'll see. But they're here not just to see Jesus, but to see Lazarus too. Lazarus is such a testimony to the greatness of Christ that these chief priests aren't just now planning to kill Jesus, but they're saying we might need to kill Lazarus too. His testimony is too great. People are flocking just to see him. People were believing in, worshiping even, gathering around. They came to Jesus on account of him. And what's so interesting is that it's absolutely nothing that Lazarus did. What did Lazarus do in this story? He died. He did nothing. But on account of him, people want to see Jesus, but they want to see him too, because of the power that was worked through him because of Jesus. This is the part that we get to play, right? Jesus works in us and through us, and it's all grace, it's all him, it's nothing that we do, but still it can be said that on account of us, people can want to see Jesus. Even though we don't do anything special, it's all Jesus and it's all grace, but still we play a part where it can be said, on account of us, people gathered around Jesus. People believe in Jesus because of the words that are spoken by his people, to their friends, to their family, to their children. The reason that Jesus gets believed in is not because he's standing right here talking to you, but because he's worked in our lives and we tell people about it, just like with Lazarus. So, just like they said, on account of him, on account of what has happened to Lazarus, people are believing. It could be said of us. So we'll move on to verse 12. It's 12 to 18. The next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel." And Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, just as it is written, "Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt." His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, when they remembered about these things that had been written about him and had been done to him, the crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to bear witness. The reason why the crowd went to meet him was that they heard he had done this sign. So again, this is the very next scene in Scripture. The very next thing that happens after Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead is that the crowd gathers to welcome him in the city and call him their king and cry out to him to save them and wave the palm branches. The reason we have the triumphal entry, the reason we have Palm Sunday, is because he raised Lazarus from the dead. The crowd is crying, "Hosanna," which literally means save us now. They're welcoming their new king into the city. They're confused. They think their king is going to go and conquer the Romans and sit on the throne. He is going to go sit on the throne, but it's going to be the heavenly throne over all the universe. So they were looking too low, but they were right. They were welcoming their king. And when we look at verse 17 again, it says, "The crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb." So this is the crowd that had gathered around when he actually raised him. These people continued to bear witness. So these people are evangelizing. These people saw the power, and they've gone out and they've just told their story. And all of these people now have gathered. It says in verse 18, "The reason why the crowd went to meet him was that they had heard he had done this sign." So you've got people going all around saying, "This man raised Lazarus from the dead. We've seen his power." And they're finally truly gathering around and they're saying, "This is it. Save us. Save us. You are our king." And he is headed straight to the cross to answer that cry. He's answering that cry of save us. But think about the parallel here for us, just in our Christian lives. It's painted very clearly. Jesus saves us. We find salvation in him. He gives us new life, just like with Lazarus. And then our lives can be witnesses to others. And then us, along with other Christians, we go out and tell people. They continue to witness. And then people gather around. They hear about this Jesus. They gather around to open their gates to him, symbolically to lay out their palms, into their hearts while they're crying, "Save us." And Jesus goes in and he conquers sin and death in us. And then we go out and we continue to bear witness. This is what Palm Sunday is for us. It's our instruction for how to respond to the truth of who Jesus is. So if you never truly have, cry out with "Hosanna, save me," and he will. Just like he entered the gates here and went to his death, he will. He did that for us. And then if he has, you continue to bear witness. Those are the two paths. When you're faced with Jesus, you cry out, "Save me." And then when he has, you go and tell others that it's possible for them. And then, as we live faithfully in our Christian lives, we remember that all of this whole scene, again, the raising of Lazarus that leads to this gathering of people, this triumphal entry that leads to him going to the cross, all of it happened because those whom Jesus loved went through a period of suffering first. Mary and Martha and Lazarus had to endure pain and suffering and tragedy on the front end. They had to go through confusion and uncertainty and disappointment. They even questioned Jesus' intentions. They said, "Why did this have to happen? Why did you not come?" I'm sure that we can all relate to this type of prayer, this type of feeling like we don't know what's going on. We're confused because we understand that God makes things good for us, and yet we go through the suffering, we go through pain, we go through confusion, disappointment, uncertainty, wondering how in the world this is what's supposed to be happening. How is this a part of God's plan? How is this glorifying to God? Why is he doing it this way? These are all the questions that Mary and Martha and Lazarus were wondering about in the days before the death and then the 4 days while he's dead. They're going through this terrible time in their life, this suffering. And it was because, the Bible tells us, that he loved them. It said because he loved them. Which is easy for us to see on the other side of it. We know that he raised Lazarus from the dead. But when they were in the midst of it, they didn't. They just saw their dead brother. And that Jesus wasn't here yet because he stayed longer where he was. And they were confused. But it's because he loves us and he glorifies himself through it. So I want to finish with 2 passages from Romans. Romans 8, verse 16. It says, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And first of all, we have to believe that. Our spirit, the Spirit has to tell us, and we have to truly believe we are children of God. He cares for us as a father. And if children, then heirs. Heirs of God and fellow heirs of Christ. Provided, this is the important part, we're heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him, in order that we may also be glorified with him. This is the heart of Lazarus' story, of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. They suffered with him that they may also be glorified. Because remember, they suffered with Jesus. Because what's that famous short verse in the Bible? Jesus wept. He didn't enjoy watching Mary and Martha suffer and watching Lazarus die and go through that pain. He wept. He suffered with them. So provided we suffer with him, in order that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. They experienced this. This is what they lived, right? They had this suffering and this pain, and it did not compare to the glory of seeing their brother walk out of his tomb where he was buried, alive again. All of that pain was forgotten because all of a sudden he's just been raised from the dead. The Son of God has just glorified himself through the raising of their brother, and all it is triumphant joy and victory. They got to experience a little microcosm. We don't get to have that necessarily in our present day, but we will get to have that in our resurrection. It is true of us that the glory that will be revealed to us in eternity doesn't compare to the sufferings that we're having to go through now. We'll then get to see why Jesus did it this way. Why did God plan it this way? Just the way Mary and Martha and Lazarus did. They got to experience it in 4 days, which is great. They got to say, oh, that's why you did that. Now we see. We will get to see it in the end. We just have to have trust in that. So I'll finish on this, Romans 8:28. And we know that for those of us who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. And that all things, not just the good things, not just the happy things, all things work together for our good. Our joy works together for our good. Our suffering, our confusion, our peace works together for our good. Our hardship works together for our good. All things. And the amazing thing is that Paul assumes something about us as Christians. At the beginning of the sentence, he says, and we know. Do we know that? We know that for those who love God, all things work together for our good. He's assuming we know that because we have to believe that. We have to actively, intentionally believe that. Faith is the idea that you grasp onto truth and you hold on tight to it. Because sometimes it's very hard to believe. But all things work together for the good of those who love God. Those whom he's called out according to his purpose. All things, not just some things, not just the things we like. Every single thing works together for the good of us eternally. So we grasp onto that truth. That's our faith, holding on to that. And we even cry out, help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. And he will. So cry out to Jesus to save us. Cry out to Jesus to help our unbelief, to help us hold on to these truths that he gave us. That when we go through things, when God is glorifying himself in our lives, it's because He loves us. That's the truth here, because he loves us. So let's pray.